Good afternoon, and welcome to today's Learn at Lunchtime program from the State Museum of Pennsylvania. I am Beth Erickson. Our topic today is exploring eclipses, and with us is Chris Kemmerer, Education and Interpretation Chief for the Bureau of State Parks, Department of Conservation and Natural Resources. Hello, Chris, and thank you for being part of today's program.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here today.
I think our audience is too. So take a minute to tell us about yourself, what you do, and what you're going to share with us today.
Yeah, so I am the Education and Interpretation Secretary for State Parks, as Beth mentioned. And in that role, I oversee all of the programming that we do across the Bureau. So all of the public programs, outdoor recreation programs, school programming. And one of the great things about my job is that when we have something unique and special that we want to talk about, that we want to educate about, like the solar eclipse, I was able to pull a team together of educators from across the state. And we worked on lessons and activities and a whole bunch, and we did a bunch of research, and we made all kinds of resources so that we can educate you about this amazing natural phenomena that's going to be happening. So yeah, I'm really excited to be here for numerous reasons.
Well, let's get started with today's program to find out more. So, Chris, when you are ready, you can begin.
All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. And thank you so much for joining us this afternoon for exploring eclipses. I'll be chatting probably for about the next half an hour-ish, maybe a little bit less. And the three main things that we'll be chatting about today is we'll chat about what an eclipse is. We'll chat about how to safely view an eclipse. And then we'll chat about what you should expect the day of and how you can prepare to go out and view the eclipse for yourself. And of course, we'll have an opportunity for questions at the end. So eclipses have occurred for millennia, right? As long as the Earth had a moon and it orbited around the sun, we had eclipses. And therefore, every culture on Earth had a way of understanding and interpreting the meaning of an eclipse. Some of them, many of them, viewed it as a bad omen. Some of them, though, did view it as a point of renewal. And just like all societies, we today have a view of what an eclipse is. And our view of an eclipse is that it is an amazing natural phenomena, an amazing celestial event that most of us want to participate in. So what exactly is a solar eclipse? So in a very simple terms, a few times a year, the moon on its orbit around the Earth, as well as the Earth's orbit around the sun, the moon essentially crosses between the Earth and the sun and casts a shadow onto the Earth. That shadow is essentially the eclipse. So basically, the moon gets between the Earth and the sun, and its shadow is cast upon the Earth. And that is what an eclipse is. So there are three main types of solar eclipses. You may recall back in October of this past year, we had what was called an annular eclipse. So an annular eclipse is when, again, the moon passes between the Earth and the sun, but the moon is at its furthest distance from the sun in its orbit. And because of that, and because of the perspective that we have on Earth, when it crosses over the sun, it never fully obscures the sun. So even at the height of that particular type of solar eclipse, you're going to have a ring of sunlight still visible, much like the image on the screen. A partial solar eclipse, and this is the type of solar eclipse that the majority of us here in Pennsylvania are going to witness on April 8th, is when the moon crosses in front of the sun, but never completely obscures it. But it also doesn't get in front of it like an annular eclipse, meaning at every point during the eclipse, we always see some sliver or a crescent shape of the sun. And of course, the kind of the kind of eclipse that we're all excited about is a total solar eclipse. This is when the moon is closest to the Earth within its orbit, And therefore, when it gets in between the Earth and the sun, it is, from our perspective, completely block out and obscure the sun. And all that is visible is the corona, or the actual atmosphere of the sun. So there are some safety tips that we need to follow in order to safely view an eclipse. And we have a little activity, some interaction for all of you. So over the next few slides, I'm going to show you a picture, and we're going to bring up a poll. And what we want you to do is essentially answer the question, is this a safe way to view the eclipse? So we'll start with our first image here. So is it safe to view a solar eclipse with just wearing sunglasses? What do you think? Yes or no? All right, well, it looks like a lot of you have been brushing up on your solar eclipse information, and that is correct. It is not safe to view the solar eclipse just with your sunglasses. What about with solar eclipse glasses? Is that a safe way to view the eclipse? All right, we still got answers coming in, but it's unanimous. The answer is yes, and that is 100% correct. Solar eclipse glasses are one of the safest ways to view the eclipse, and we're going to be chatting more about them a little later on in the presentation. What about if you open up the camera on your phone and look through the camera on your phone? Is that a safe way to view the eclipse? All right, this one was a little bit more of a mixed bag, and that's okay. But this is not a safe way to view the eclipse. It's still, it doesn't give you any protection looking through your camera to view the eclipse. So this is not a safe way to view the eclipse. This is probably an easy one. Should you look at the eclipse with your naked eye? All right, this was fast and unanimous. Wonderful. Yes, absolutely. Do not look at the eclipse with your naked eye. Absolutely. All right, let's see. What about through a scope or a telescope, but with a solar filter on it? Is this a safe way to view the eclipse? All right, so most of you said yes, and indeed it is a safe way to view the eclipse. The key to this is that it's fitted with a solar filter. That's what makes it safe. If you were just looking through just a telescope without any solar filter or scope, that would not be safe. But because it has a solar filter on it, it makes it a safe way to view the solar eclipse. And this way is a little different from all the rest. Is this a safe way to view the solar eclipse? All right, there's a little bit of uncertainty here, but this is a safe way to view the solar eclipse. And we're going to chat a little bit more about why that is in a moment. So in terms of eclipse safety, the underlying rule is don't look directly at the sun. Makes sense, pretty simple, but it's important to remember because I think a lot of us are going to get really excited and you may forget. So there are two major categories for how you can view the eclipse, or any eclipse for that matter. And that is called direct viewing. So essentially that's you looking directly at the sun, but you have some kind of filter that you're looking through. So these ladies are wearing solar eclipse glasses. So solar eclipse glasses block out more than 99% of visible light. So they very much protect your eyes from the sun. You're not going to burn your eyes. You're not going to damage your eyes while wearing them. However, you need to be careful with the solar eclipse glasses that you purchase. You want to make sure that they are ISO certified. Ideally, they should be manufactured in the United States. But the American Astronomical Society has a website, and we're going to share that link with you in the chat. and they have a list of reputable manufacturers and vendors to purchase your solar eclipse glasses from. Solar eclipse glasses generally are relatively inexpensive, and oftentimes the few that I've purchased ended up coming in like a pack of like 4 or a pack of 6. So this is probably the safest and the easiest way to view the solar eclipse. The other safe way to directly view the solar eclipse is by having a properly fitted solar filter on a telescope or on like a scope or some other optic device. These are very expensive or can be very expensive. So the best way to utilize this method is probably to attend a program that will be having telescopes and other optical devices out and fitted and ready to go. That other kind of major category of safely viewing the eclipse is indirectly. And you view it indirectly with what is termed a pinhole projector. So a pinhole projector can be a lot of different things. So it can be as simple as an index card with a hole punched in it. Very similar to this very kind of fancy outline of the US here, and you can see kind of that hole there in the middle. It could be a colander with all of those holes. It could be the mesh of a mesh baseball cap. If you lattice your fingers together, it could be the opening between your fingers. So pretty much anything can be a pinhole projector. So how do you use these? Because you're not looking directly at the sun. So they may appear a little counterintuitive at first. So when you have your pinhole projector, the first thing you need to do is have your back to the sun, right? Because you don't want to look directly at it. Then you want to hold that pinhole projector up against a light-colored surface. So perhaps it's a sidewalk, a light-colored building, a light-colored vehicle. You could probably even lay down a white sheet on the grass. But you want to have it against a light-colored surface so that you can see the projection that's going to come through. And then what you want to do is you want to adjust your hand or the pinhole projector so that you're about 2 to 3 feet away from that light surface, because that's going to be the best distance at which to be able to see the projection. And essentially, you're going to see a projection of the sun and the eclipse happen on that light surface through the hole or the holes of your pinhole projector. So as we all probably know, the eclipse is happening on Monday, April 8th. But the entire event is about 2.5 hours. So the eclipse is going to start around 2 o'clock. That's when the moon is going to start crossing in between the Earth and the sun. And it's going to take about 2.5 hours for it to completely cross in front of and then exit away from the sun. Totality, or the height of the solar eclipse, is only about 3 to 4 minutes. And it will be between 3:15 and 3:25. Actually, probably closer to 3:15 and 3:20. But that's going to be totality, or the height of the eclipse. So if you're in Scranton or Philly or Harrisburg, where you're in a partial eclipse, during that height of the eclipse, 3:15 to say 3:25, that's when you're going to have like the peak of your eclipse experience. That's when the sun's going to be covered at least 90 or 95% of the way. Where if you're in the northwestern part of the state or somewhere else where there's totality, you'll be experiencing the total eclipse during that 3 to 4 minutes of time. And only for those folks in totality, for those 3 to 4 minutes, that's the only time where it's actually safe to view the eclipse with the naked eye. Otherwise, you need to have your solar eclipse glasses or use that pinhole projector. So here's the overall path of the eclipse. This path of totality is about 100 miles wide, give or take. So you can see I was going to cross through Texas, up across Arkansas and into Ohio, this northwest corner of PA, and then across New England. And this is kind of a zoomed in version of Pennsylvania. So this will give you a much better sense of kind of where you are and what kind of eclipse experience you might expect to have. I've never experienced an eclipse, so I'm super excited about it. And let me tell you, I'm lucky enough that I get to go to Presque Isle and I get to work that day. So I will be up here. But even if I got to stay down in Harrisburg, I'm pretty confident that I will have a really amazing experience. So what should you expect? What's that experience going to be like? So the first thing is, regardless of where you are and how you're going to experience the eclipse, you need to make sure that you have a safe way to view it. You need those solar eclipse glasses, you need a pinhole projector. Make sure you have a safe way to view the eclipse. A lot of the planning for your experience has a lot to do with the experience that you want to have and what you're able to do. If you're not able to travel to totality, but perhaps you're able to step outside, during like the 3 o'clock to 3:30, half an hour, because you're working all day and you're able to step outside, just make sure you can step outside to a place where you have a clear view of the sky and a clear view of the sun, with those, solar eclipse glasses. However, if you're planning to travel, there are a few things to kind of keep in mind. Particularly if you're traveling to totality, you should expect large crowds. Think about it in the context of a large sporting event or like a concert or something like that, where you're going to have lots and lots of people kind of converging into the kind of the same area. So expect longer travel times to kind of get to where you want to go. Expect there to be large crowds, like just kind of hanging out, waiting for the eclipse to happen. And because of that, it's going to expect a long day. You're going to want to get there earlier. You probably don't want to be rolling in at 1:30. You probably want to show up earlier than that. And then again, because of those crowds, it's going to take longer to leave than perhaps a typical day. So think about that. Think about what you would need for a long day outside. So definitely bring snacks, bring water, wear layers, wear comfortable clothing, right? Hopefully it doesn't rain on the 8th, but still, that's not to say that it won't start off kind of rainy and clear. So wear layers, be prepared, bring a folding chair or a long chair so that you have something comfortable to sit, for your time outside. But just like we need to prepare for our experience, the natural world is going to experience that eclipse too. And one of the things that we're probably going to notice, obviously, is that the skies are going to darken, but they're going to darken to twilight levels. So it's not going to be so dark like a moonless, cloudy night. There'll still be some kind of visible light available. Think twilight. The temperatures are going to drop. Anecdotally, through various total eclipses, folks have measured upwards of 10 degrees plus of a temperature drop when the totality actually happens. Keep an eye out for the change in animal behavior. Our diurnal animals, those animals that are active during the day, think squirrels and American robins, they're going to quiet down, right? The robins are going to go probably perch up in a tree somewhere. The squirrels are going to go up to their nests. But our nocturnal animals, those animals that are active at night, are going to become more active, right? We might hear crickets chirping. We might hear owls hooting. So that's something to kind of pay attention to. The other thing is that there's going to be a really interesting play of light and shadows. So most of the unique things in terms of light and shadow that kind of occur around an eclipse happens within totality. But even within a partial eclipse, we should be able to see these things called crescent shadows. And that's an example of the crescent shadows right here. So even though the star of the show is the moon crossing in front of the sun and kind of blocking that out, there's a lot of other interesting things that are going to be happening during the eclipse to the natural world that you may want to pay attention to. Ultimately, we want everybody to go out and have and experience the eclipse, and we want them to have a safe time. So the best thing to ensure that is to make sure you have a safe way to view the eclipse and actually use it, and to put just a little bit of planning into where and how you want to experience the eclipse. Are you just going to be able to step outside to your backyard or a sidewalk? Are you going to travel to totality? Or perhaps you're going to try to at least to travel to maybe a local park to view even just the partial eclipse. You decide how you want to experience and then plan accordingly, but make sure you have a safe way to view the eclipse and make sure you use them. And with that, we will open it up for questions.
Terrific. That was such great information. So we do have some questions. Let's start with, when will the next total solar eclipse occur in Pennsylvania?
So the next total solar eclipse that we're going to experience in North America is in 2044. The totality is going to be out west over Montana and the Dakotas. So at that point, the whole state's just going to be experiencing a partial eclipse at the time. So the next total eclipse anywhere in North America is 2044.
Are there the same number of lunar eclipses as there are solar eclipses each year?
You know, that is a wonderful question. I do not know the answer, but I would imagine that we can find that on NASA's website about eclipses.
And then what happens on April 8th if there's bad weather or it's cloudy? How does that affect the eclipse?
Well, it's going to diminish the experience. A lot of it, I think, is going to be determined on the severity of the bad weather. So I believe like earlier this week, it might have been Monday or Tuesday, it was kind of cloudy, but you could still see the sun kind of coming through the clouds. I would imagine on that kind of like lightly cloudy day, we're still going to be able to experience it in some way. However, if it's like, you know, a really rainy day where the clouds are heavy and they're dark and we're getting a lot of rain, or, you know, heck, maybe even snow at that point, there's a very good chance that we may not even really get to experience it. So the weather is definitely going to affect the eclipse. So let's hope that we have clear skies like we have today.
So tell us a little bit more about the animals getting confused. So one of the audience members said the last time there was an eclipse, the nocturnal animals seemed to get confused and a bat was flying out during a time when you wouldn't typically see it. So
yeah, and
why does this happen?
Yes. So what's interesting about this is that for all of the years that this kind of behavior has been observed, right, where nocturnal animals start to become active during an eclipse, we only have anecdotal evidence. And part of that reason is because totality is so short and people are so interested in the eclipse itself that we haven't really put a lot of time into the study of everything that happens around us during the eclipse. But the kind of the hypothesis that is being shared is basically that it gets dark, right? It gets dark like twilight. Think about when bats in particular are most active, right? Right around, so like if it gets dark in the summer around 8:30, 9 o'clock, that's when we start to see a lot of bat activity from that kind of hour, 2-hour time frame right around like dusk to when it gets dark. And that's the light level that they're at during an eclipse. So they're going to come out because they think it's night, right? So we think that's why the animals are changing, because they're reacting to the level of sunlight that they're experiencing. But again, it's been anecdotal. We haven't been able to have any real scientific study about why that is happening.
Can you explain more about the crescent shadows and why that occurs?
You know, I wish I could, and unfortunately I cannot. I know there's just so much to know about eclipses. I mean, there are people who I think their whole life is studying and chasing eclipses, and they probably would have a much better way of explaining that. However, what I do know is that a lot of it has to do with the minimizing of the sunlight and how the sunlight that we do have is actually reacting to our atmosphere and kind of filtering down to the Earth. So that is the best that I know. Again, I highly suggest folks going and visiting the eclipse site on NASA's webpage, because they have tons of information.
So we talked about the wild animals being affected. Will domesticated animals perhaps be affected, notice the change as well?
They may, honestly, I'm not sure how they would react. And I think that's something for us to perhaps pay attention to and make note of. But that is a really interesting question.
Can this eclipse be seen anywhere in the world, or is it limited to North America or to a certain location?
It's simply limited to mostly North America. If I were to bring up the slide again, the first map that I showed of the United States, you'll see that pretty much by the time you got to like the Caribbean, they weren't really getting any part of the eclipse. So like Africa is not going to experience this eclipse. So it is only a part of the world that's going to experience it.
I'm going to go back to the animals again with a question. Will looking at the sun affect animal eyes as well? Now we're getting into real deep biomedical.
I know. So honestly, I do not know. I don't know the answer to that. I have a feeling that there's probably, particularly mammals, I would imagine, would probably react the same way we do, but I feel like that they may have better instincts than we have sometimes.
I think that's probably very true. Would you explain a little bit more about why viewing the eclipse through the cell phone is unsafe?
Yes, actually, the other thing that I should mention about that too is that it's because of how the optics of the camera, just like binoculars or a telescope, because they basically magnify, it enhances the amount of light that's actually reaching your eye. So even if you're wearing solar eclipse glasses, do not use binoculars or a scope or telescope that's not fitted with a solar filter, because it's still unsafe at that point. And it has to do with the fact that a lot of these optic devices, your camera being included, they tend to magnify the light. And because of how they work with like in a prism, and they move the light around, it actually kind of concentrates the light. So it is not safe. And it's not safe, again, to view an unfiltered telescope or scope with the solar eclipse glasses either. Not safe.
There are several questions about it. Yes, there are several questions about which state parks are offering programs, eclipse programs. Will they have enough parking? What kind of? You said a lot of people are expected, but how many different places could people go?
All right. So this is a fantastic question, and so we have a bunch of programs happening the day of. I'm going to do something for you all. Sorry, I am getting your answer. So I am going to throw a link into the chat, and it is to our DCNR calendar of events, specifically our Eclipse programming page. So this is going to list all of the Eclipse programming that we have like leading up to the eclipse, including the day of. So when I last looked, there were about 10 parks that are actively promoting programming on the 8th. And some of them, it's kind of varied as to what each one is doing. But from my understanding, most parks are going to be having staff available to at least answer questions. If you are going to a park that's in totality, so there are 4 state parks that are in totality, Erie Bluffs, MK Goddard, Pymatuning, and Presque Isle, they all will have staff stationed at various points in the park to help answer questions. I'm not 100% certain if any of them are actively doing programming the day of, mainly because we anticipate a lot of visitors. So it's going to be more so that we'll be there to answer questions and to make sure that people are using pinhole projectors correctly or that they have solar eclipse glasses. But check out the calendar of events to see what parks are offering program the day of. And there's a lot doing programming leading up to it.
So one of the audience members lives 2 miles from Presque Isle. Should they go to the park or sit in their yard?
Personally, I would sit in my yard because large crowds tend to give me anxiety. But I would say, I don't know. I feel like this is a very personal decision. If you have a clear view, like if you step out to your backyard at around like 3:30 in the afternoon, and you have a good clear view of the sky and where the sun is in the sky, I would say that you perhaps avoid the crowds and stay home. But yeah, I think that's a very personal decision. I think a lot of it has to deal with how good of a view you have of the sky in your backyard, particularly in terms of where the sun is between 3 and 3:30 in the afternoon.
So Chris, any chance you could easily pull up the map of the path in Pennsylvania again?
Yeah. I can do that. Just let me do a little bit of scrolling. So just the map of Pennsylvania, right?
To show the path of the eclipse.
Okay, actually, what? Sorry, this is probably a silly way to do it. Can everyone see that? I'm not sharing it, am I?
Nope.
Not. Fantastic. I really do know technology.
But you will be sharing in just a moment, I believe it.
Yeah.
So this is a unique opportunity. We chatted earlier that, if you had a chance within a 4-hour drive to see something that you're not going to see again, for many years, this is really a great opportunity for people who live in the Pennsylvania area to view the eclipse. And now you are sharing. Well done.
Thank you. Yeah. So, so this is that line of totality. So, so like the whole state really does have an amazing experience. So I think that the choice is yours in terms of where you would like to go. But yeah, I would say that if you are within a 2-hour drive and you have the ability, or even a 4-hour drive and you have the ability to get anywhere within the path, right? Like even going into Ohio or New York, perhaps, I think that would be, a fantastic experience to have. But even if you're kind of down in this like south central, southeast corner of the state, and driving that 5 to 7 hours just seems like a lot, I think it's still worthwhile to kind of plan a bit of your afternoon to be able to step outside and experience it, particularly if you've never experienced an eclipse before. And it's going to be, I think, an incredible event, regardless of where you are.
Well, I think that's all we have for today. I want to thank everyone for your questions. And Chris, what would you like people to remember from today's program?
One, I want them to be excited about the eclipse and just be amazed about how interesting nature is, and just that there are phenomena happening everywhere. And of course, have fun and safely view that eclipse on the 8th.
Fantastic. Thank you, Chris, for being part of today's program.
Thanks so much for having me. It was a lot of fun.
Please join us again for more Learn at Lunchtime programs. Visit the State Museum of Pennsylvania's website at statemuseumpa.org for program information and to sign up.